Welcome everyone. My name is Jean Meyer and I'm your moderator today for the maintenance breakout session, which is going to be about wheelchair lifts and small bus maintenance. I work for the Minnesota Department of Transportation in the Office of Transit and Active Transportation as the compliance coordinator. My apologies, I have a dog in my house and she's barking, sorry. My role is to assist our public transit systems and subrecipients with meeting the compliance needs of their grant agreements, topics that deal with procurement, cost allocation, disadvantaged business enterprises, comprehensive reviews, Title VI and Title VII, Americans with Disabilities Act, school bus, charter bus type services, incidents and accidents, and your safety plans all fall under the compliance area. Before I introduce our presenters today, let's cover the session logistics. This session has a question and answer element at the end. Questions should be submitted from the virtual attendees through the Zoom's question and answer function, which you'll see a tab at the bottom of your screen. Live audience questions will come from attendees in the Rochester live room following both presentations. As your moderator, I will keep track of any questions submitted and then we'll ask them our moderators, ask them of our panelists at the end of this session. The first presenter will be Cody Reynolds. Cody is the after sales field trainer with Braun Ability. He joined Braun Ability in 2010 and spent the first 6 years working on the production line, building the product. The last 4 years, he's been in the lift technical department, traveling and doing such events, doing events field service. Cody will be presenting on the introduction into the features of our Braun Ability wheelchair, how they operate, some basic troubleshooting on most common failures, and some basic overview of our general maintenance. Second presenter will be Kenny Kirch. I hope I say that right, Kenny, please excuse me. Customer support manager with North Central Bus. Kenny has been with North Central Bus since 1992 and has held many different positions in the service department. Currently, customer support manager, tech support certifications or training in Rycon and Braun lifts. Currently, he has tech support certifications and training in Rycon and Braun lifts, Roush Propane, Cummins B Series, Ford 6.8 liter, and a 6R140. He's attended St. Cloud Technical College and graduated in the automotive tech class. He's currently the chairperson on the Bluebird Bus Dealer Service Council. And Kenny will go over the basic operations of the Intermotive interlock system with the help of Intermotive. He'll also talk about bus body maintenance and bus electrical system layout and function of components. So Cody, you're up.
Awesome, good deal. Bear with me. I don't use Zoom very often here. So let me get this. And how am I able to then share my screen? Oh, here we go. Am I going to be able to do this simultaneously where they can watch both?
Yes.
Maybe not. Yes and no. Maybe yes, no. Okay, I see kind of two inputs there. Let me do this. You may not be able to see my screen, but I'll at least be able to live present. Okay. All right, cool. Sorry about that. So, hey guys, thank you for the introduction. Again, my name's Cody Reynolds, like you said, and we'll kind of jump in here. And I believe I'm given an hour of presenting time, correct? Or are we splitting it between a half hour each? What was the way that was going to be done? I'm sorry.
You're splitting the hour. So you have about 20, 25 minutes and then you need questions and answers.
All right. So, all right. Well, so we'll do a basic run through on it then. I guess, sorry, I had kind of a misunderstanding there. Just heads up, this isn't a certification course for anybody. This is just kind of an informational. You still have to go through if you are a dealer or if you use a dealer for purchasing parts, that so on and so forth. You still have to go about the same way. So there's no certification. I can send a certificate of attendance out to anybody if interested afterwards. So real quick, this is a DPA lift you guys are probably familiar with. And when I say DPA lift, what I mean by DPA is a dual parallel arm lift. We have the dual parallel arms on either side of the lift. And there's 3 to those families. We still have the Millennium series, which I've got over here, which I believe most of you guys have Centuries. But the Millennium is in a hydraulic outer barrier compared to whereas the Century is a mechanical outer barrier. Kind of quick and vague on that, where I can manually open it, and that one relies on a cylinder to open and close the barrier. And I don't know if any of you guys see Vistas, but everything that's a Vista is basically a Century where it has a stacking platform. All right. So whenever I talk about those, and particularly Century Vista are basically the same thing other than that stacking platform. So I think we're pretty much covering maintenance, but if you guys need diagnostics on it and any of the other information is the service manual of the lift, which is available on brownability.com. There is a way to get to any service manual. For you to know what service manual you need, as I've got a Century or Millennium, is we will have a Century. It'll say NCL, which stands for NHTSA Century Lift, or a NL, which would be a Millennium Lift, and NVL would be Vista. The other thing that I'll have available for you guys afterwards, if you guys want to scan the QR code at the end of this as I skip to the end of it when we get there, is a troubleshooting guide. So any other additional information in there, it's a great tool if you guys ever have questions about anything, particularly service-wise, has highlighted diagrams, stuff like that in there. One of the other things is a multimeter. Is definitely one of the big things that you guys need to hold on to or have. 12 volts voltmeter is basically what I'm checking throughout the entire lift. And to identify what lift you have, to know, maybe it doesn't say Century right on the front, maybe the stickers wore out. You have ID tags down on the lower parallel arm and up here as well then on the tower. Okay, on the inside, always the opposite side of the pump assembly. Go through that service manual, check terminology. Sorry, I thought I was going to give a whole thing here. So one of the biggest things that I want to touch on for service, though, for you guys, if we're just kind of covering that stuff, is the big thing are these 4 safety or the certification checklist. And again, that information can be found in the service manual. It's such a I'm not trying to bore you guys with mentioning service manual. It's just that service manual has so much information in there for you guys. If I don't get to cover it today, you can always read through it and everything's in there anyways. All right. So the first thing being the certification checklist. So anytime a bus comes in and you get the vehicle in there on site and you do anything, I don't care if you replace the yellow hand grip or even pre-trip inspections for operators, the big thing that needs to be touched base on is the 4 safeties or your certification checklist. And I always start with the lift on the ground, make sure it unfolds and goes down correctly. At least then I know I have proper operation. And I will hover my foot above the outboard barrier. And if I prevent that outer barrier from coming up off the ground, you'll see I lose hand pendant lights. So it interrupted a circuit on my lift to prevent it from coming up in an unsafe manner. Okay. So, and then the barrier will raise if I let it raise, and the lift will continuously then go up. The other thing that you guys want to check is your inboard barrier. All right. So if I prevent the inboard barrier, this inner flap here, a lot of guys will call it the inboard flap or inner flap. If I prevent it from raising as the lift is going down, I can stop lift operation there as well. So maybe like a backpack or something's hanging over if you guys were to get technical on it, or somebody wasn't centered right at the lifts going up or down. You can see I can also prevent the lift from moving once it's down if I occupy that inboard barrier. And one of the other key things you want to check is your threshold alarm. Is if you're standing on this threshold plate and we apply equal pressure, it doesn't really necessarily have to be, but if I'm standing on it and I go down 1 inch, okay, I should get an audible and visual alarm. You guys should be able to maybe see that red light. I'm not sure if you can, but you can see that you guys can hear it through my mic, and then it still works, lift still operates. but it just gives the operator saying, some sort of attention, be like, hey, something's going on. I need to see and stop what I'm doing to go inside the vehicle. And maybe somebody else is starting to come out. And the other one is the platform should not fold if occupied. And there is a technical spec on there, 50 pounds, okay, is typically what we go by. And it's not just 50 pounds anywhere. It's 50 pounds. There's a yellow tape strip on the back called the occupied zone. If you center in 6 inches on the center of the platform, there's a weld nut right in the middle, and you put 50 pounds there and hit fold, I should be able to prevent, obviously I weigh more than 50 pounds, but I hit fold and I should be able to prevent the lift from folding. Okay, and then if I get off of it, it should fold in. All right. If it was not to fold when occupying or when not occupying it, there are adjustments in there. That would be considered platform fold pressure. They would be adjusted on the back side of the pump assembly. And again, that's in the service manual on how to make those adjustments too, by making sure that they're adjusted correctly so you don't hurt somebody. Because there are ways to bypass those features. And let's say little Johnny was sitting on the platform, you hit fold, you had it over, too much pressure added, or you're messing with your tower switches, it could actually fold them into the vehicle under full pressure. So you'll want to make sure that those 4 things are always there, and you always check those 4 items anytime. Kind of looking at maintenance though, and kind of some of the key things to identify is if I operate the lift, okay, and I hit the unfold button. The only button I'm going to hit right now is unfold. And the lift should stop by itself at vehicle floor level. It shouldn't stop early. It shouldn't continue to go down and stop a little late. It should stop at floor level. And when I mean at floor level, not floor level here like what I'm standing on, but the vehicle's floor level, and this inner barrier is laying flat on the threshold plate. Vehicle floor level should stop there by itself. All right, and then I have to use down to go down the rest of the way. What would you look at if that was if it wasn't quite doing that? Well, you would look at your tower switches, your tower switch adjustments. And again, not to sound like a broken record, but that information on how to adjust those are in there. Now, if unfold or down wasn't working at all, and neither unfold nor down worked, you might be looking at more of an electrical issue than you would be an adjustment issue, right? Same thing for up and fold, okay? It would be our tower 2 micro switch. So when I press the up button, it should stop by itself at floor level, okay? I'm still holding up, it doesn't move anymore. And then I hit fold and it starts to fold in, all right? It's not whether or not it works at all, it's the fact of where it stops. Okay, where does it stop at? If it stops early or too late, would tell me adjustments need to be made. If it's not working at all, I have an electrical failure probably somewhere, whether a corroded micro switch internally or anything like that, all right? Or a cut wire, whatever it might be. The other thing that you guys would look at, so that's your basic operations there. And looking at that stuff here. So some of the other things that you want to check during regular maintenance are these latches here on the back. If you guys can see those, there's latches back here and a gas spring that grab these rollers on the side of the platform. And the purpose of those is to catch the lift as if it's losing hydraulic pressure, okay? Typically a lift will lose hydraulic pressure over a 24, 48-hour period. That's normal. It's just kind of what a hydraulic system does. It loses pressure over time, okay? But it's gonna drift out into those latches, and the purpose of those latches is to keep it from hitting against the door. So let's say if it did sit over the weekend or a long weekend, whatever it is, and it lost that hydraulic pressure, you go to open the door and the lift doesn't fall out on you. You don't want to leave it in these latches though when driving, primarily because if you do, for one, you're going to see the lift. My handrails are loose. A lot of the platform is going to be loose. We want to make sure that it's fully stowed because it could bounce out of those latches, hit against the door, and break the window. So anytime I stow the lift, I hit fold. Hold that for an extra 3 seconds, okay? That's going to make everything nice and tight. If you still have stuff loose after that, things that you can find there, you got your threshold plate here, you see how I'm tapping on that? You shouldn't get any noise out of it. There are bumpers here on the back side of the inboard barrier, all right, where this one being current production, we currently switch over to a black block that are back here, black nylon block. If you have older units, you may have a white nylon block. If those are wore out, you can replace them, or if the hardware is loose, a lot of times, units that have been more used, maybe they're loose. Those are applying pressure to my tower back here to apply that downward pressure to that threshold plate that's inside there to prevent that from rattling. That's a super common area there. Your upper stow blocks here, you want to make sure they are there. For one, a lot of times I've seen them where they get missing, where backpacks to grab them or something, they get bent out of the way. If the lift is not stowing tight into these blocks and it's going down the road shaking and all sorts of things, it ultimately puts stress on the base and can break welds on the base plate. A $5 block and bracket or whatever it might cost, kind of see what I'm going there with it, compared to a $300-400 base plus labor to get this stuff replaced, is definitely something you want to make sure that these are always there. Any hardware in the outer barrier, you always want to make sure that it's there and tight. If you ever find loose hardware within the barrier, whether it's a Century or a Millennium lift, remove the hardware, spray it out or clean it with, say, brake clean. Put red Loctite back on the screws, okay? There are some spots that require blue, but any hardware we want to use red. And it may make it more difficult down the road if you have to replace it, but the red Loctite, for safety reasons, we want to make sure that the hardware doesn't come out. Reapply the red Loctite then, and then snug up a lot of the hardware. A lot of this hardware that's out here, you don't want to over crank it, especially the pivot area for this latch. If that screw if it's too tight, it could prevent the barrier from opening, along with missing hardware in these areas here, in the pivot areas where these double washers, or if these pins have been pushed in too much or not enough, preventing the barrier from opening and closing there. And one of the other items that you would see, a lot of times the handrails are loose, and they are adjustable underneath the handrails, but just with a larger Allen wrench, I can tighten those back up. You don't want to over tighten them, so a good term to kind of use there is snug against these rubber bumpers. Okay, there's these rubber bumpers up here that the handrails rest against, and if the lift is going in and taco shaping that rubber bumper, they're over tightened. If there's a handrail that keeps coming loose and you have to keep adjusting it over time, go ahead and pull that bolt out down here for the adjustment, put some blue Loctite on it, and then tighten it back up. Okay, that would make that a lot easier for you. Or sometimes they've been tightened down so much, if you over tighten handrails, it can cause uneven deployment, uneven drifting, stowing issues, different things like that if they've been over tightened, just because you want to, get the guy to be quiet about it, complaining about it rattling going down the road. So those are some key items there. What do we use to lubricate our lift with? Typically what we've got for any of our pivot areas, and if you guys want to see some more in-depth on that, we do have a YouTube video out there now that really covers a lot of the good maintenance of pivot points and going in depth on it. This is an item that's in our service manual. It's called LPS2. It's a pretty good lubricant that we use all over the lift. A lot of times guys can't find this, or it's too expensive because this stuff is quite pricey. It's like 15 bucks a can. Is a lot of times you can use silicone. CRC makes a good one called Power Lube. It works really great. It's low odor, so you're not fumigating the buses and things like that. But basically all this is, if I had my straw, I would just go throughout and lightly hit my pivot areas within my pivot pins on the inside and things like that. So LPS2 is a great lubricant for all pivot areas on the lift. I've got another thing here called Dories, or it says lube stick on the actual stick itself. It's a white wax stick. And the purpose of this, you may not have to do this every time you're doing maintenance on it, but if you've got this stick, you might as well go ahead and do it, especially if they run a lot of cycles on them. And basically right here, these black, we call them the saddle pads. There's these black pads right here that come up and rub against these lower arms. And if I run this down, I'm just going to take this and I can take 3 swipes across that pad. And that's just going to help prevent friction along this pad. Sometimes if it has a lot of friction there, or things going on, you might notice a chatter kind of coming in or out of the lift or out of the vehicle. And this just keeps it nice and lubricated, preventing any sort of hesitation within those areas while this pad slides up and down as the lift stows. Good key areas there where we might look for hydraulic leaks for the lift if you're doing maintenance on it would be obviously right around the fittings or where the valves are that go into the cylinders. These newer style cylinders, you guys may be used to seeing vent lines on the back side, which this one still has them, but they're not necessary. And so a lot of the newer ones, we don't even run vent lines on there, just a little cap. And they'll start bleeding fluid. There's actually a key slot where the outer cap mounts to the actual cylinder part here itself. And if there's fluid consistently coming out of there when you're running it up or stowing would be an indication for new cylinders. Anytime that you see consistent fluid leak on here is a good indication to replace the cylinders. There's not really a cycle count on that. Sometimes, it just may vary here and there on what that is, but these newer ones are seeing a lot more life out of them. Anytime that you guys replace cylinders, it would be in sets, so pairs. Okay, so you would put, that's the only way we sell them anyway, so whoever you get parts through, or they're probably only going to sell them to you in sets. You have to replace both sides. And that goes with a lot of different things on our lift for gas springs and stuff like that. There is a cycle counter up here by the red flashing light, and if you were to read the service manual, it would indicate 750 cycles or so to constantly, every 750 cycles, to have to go through and do a maintenance on the lift and a general check. But sometimes buses, sometimes school buses maybe don't run that often, or whatever kind of transit agency it's within. Maybe it's an extra unit. You still want to make sure that thing is maintenance 3 to 4 times a year and lubricated and spot checked over, and check those certification checklists or 4 safeties on the lift at least 4 times a year minimum, if not more, especially the ones that are in service. But you can keep track of the cycles up here with that. You can check the fluid level of the pump assembly. And the fluid level here, you always want to check fluid level when the lift is on the ground with the barrier open, okay? And if you're using it, let's say like a white transit bus, maybe your floor to ground's only 28 inches if it's, say, like a Ford Transit, or a little bit higher if it's in like a white cutaway, and definitely a lot higher if it's in a school bus. So when you run the lift all the way down and with the barrier open and you check the fluid level on that reservoir, it may be different from one product to the other, okay? It's not that we skimped you fluid. It's just because as the lift goes down and deploys, all right, it pushes the fluid out of the cylinders back to the reservoir, all right? So right there would be a good spot. You guys can check the fluid level. Like I said, you could top it off if you want, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we skimped you on any fluid. I haven't really heard of that too much. So to maybe kind of go over your gas springs real quick and how to identify them for regular maintenance. We have these ones back here. There's the larger set, and I've got one here I can show you. It's the kick-out spring, okay? This thing's got, what's it say, 269 pounds of pressure on it, and there's actually one on each side, all right? And the purpose of the kick-out spring is when the lift is stowed into the vehicle, it typically kind of leans back a little bit, right? So when you hit deploy or you hit unfold, all right, the lift will come out, okay? And as what's initially getting that lift to come out past that center point of gravity, so gravity can kind of take over and the lift kind of deploys down from there, or is the kick-out springs. So if you ever have one where you gotta kind of push it out a little bit, or it has an issue deploying, it's really slow, and the lift tight latches catch it as it's deploying, the kick-out springs would be a good place to go. After that, you've got your inner barrier gas springs, okay? which are what actuate my inboard barrier here. And they're located inside these fold arm assemblies over here. Okay, there's an outer and an inner tube here, and there's a gas spring inside of there. And they're what actuate up that inboard barrier as the lift goes down. So maybe if you have issues where it's kind of hesitating, unfolding, or things like that, it's because they're also applying pressure to the switch that's in this lower arm here. And if it's not applying enough pressure upward, you can see that saddle could come away from that switch, causing intermittent electrical issues that really will get you going scratching your head. So definitely a thing there is the inner barrier gas springs. And on both of those gas springs, a good indication that they're going bad is you can just take your finger or something, and you might get, I got the red grease from the fold arm there, but you'll get a light coat of black grease on your fingers or a rag. The other way to check the inner barrier springs
Cody, I just want you to know that you have about 5 minutes if that works.
that is great. Awesome. I should be ready. Thank you.
Okay.
So the other way to check the inner barrier springs, other than the black oil on those springs, is if you actuate these saddles, and if you guys were to physically do it, you guys know that you guys can rotate these downward a little bit. You can force them down. And what that does is unlocks the inner barrier where I could set it down. And then if I just kind of let it go or let it come up, see how fast it retracts back to my foot? That's a good indication those springs are still good. If I were to do that and it just kind of hesitated coming up, I would know that those gas springs are bad as well. And one I know you guys have probably seen is the outer barrier here. Is if the outer barrier is not coming up, and a lot of times what you'll see is guys will kick it up and such like that. A lot of will be your outer barrier gas springs that are out here on the side of the platform itself. So if those are going bad, you can definitely isolate, or if the barrier is not coming up. A lot of times guys too will then replace those gas springs and notice they have other issues. The barrier won't go down, right? They step on the platform. I wouldn't say necessarily it's normal, but sometimes on, maybe older new, just units in general, they kind of have a wear-in period, but it's really not a good term for it because a lot of times, most of the time, these brackets here can be adjusted side to side to create a better pivot on both sides here. Again, if this washer has been over tightened, or this screw has been over tightened against this flange washer, or if this pin, maybe a chair ran into the side of this and pushed this pin in a little bit, it could cause that barrier to not be able to actuate properly. So, are we doing any questions during this portion of it, or are we following up with that maybe at the end?
We were going to do it at the end, but this is a particular question about the lift's life cycle. So I think it'd be a better idea to do it now, if that's okay with Kenny.
The life cycle of the lift?
So there's 3 specific questions.
Sure.
What is the life cycle of a lift?
So yeah, so typically the life cycle, it just varies, you guys being up north, I could see where if it's not maybe cleaned and maintained as well, if you guys use salt on your roads, I could see that kind of, hurting the life cycle of it. We don't really have a cycle number. I've been in places where, they have 1,000 cycles on them. They look terrible, right? They don't take care of them. Or I've been in other places, even northern states like New York, where they use a lot of salt, and they've had 10,000 cycles on them. And that good maintenance there that they did at this particular location is these things were almost flawless. They were great. They had scratches, dings, and stuff like that, but they were great. So I'm not really going to put a cycle count on how often they should be replaced.
Okay. Well, and this next question then reflects kind of on the lift warranty. What is the general warranty on lifts? Do you have a general warranty or?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
So what our warranty is if the lift was registered, okay, so whoever you guys purchased the vehicle from, if you're not a dealer, or if if you're like an agency that takes care of their own fleet but still has to go to the dealer for warranty parts, if that unit was registered upon purchase, which it should be, it's 3 years parts, 3 years labor, and a total, so 2 additional years of hydraulic parts only. If that registration is not filled out, it's 3 years parts, 1 year labor, and nothing additional on hydraulic parts.
Very important to do that form then and get that
Yeah.
warranty in. Okay.
Yep.
Last question I have for you. Does the service life of the lift align with FTA's vehicle minimum service life? So it's typically when we have our medium-sized bus cutaways, the minimum service life is 5 years to 7 years. And so we're just wondering, does that align with the replacement cycle of a bus? Will lifts last as long as the buses?
Again, that varies in maintenance, like we mentioned before, but I've seen plenty of times where even school buses, not just cutaways, they get 10, 15 years out of these things and the lifts are still running strong. So again, to put a date on it, it all really goes back to maintenance and what kind of environment it's being, and how it's being operated. If it's being abused by the operator, if they're operating it well or correctly, things like that all kind of vary. But no, they'll meet or exceed a lot of the cutaways themselves.
Okay. Any questions in the room at all from the live audience? Looks like we're good to go. Wonderful. Thank you, Cody, for your time. And Kenny, are you ready to join us?
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yes, I am. So,
Welcome, Kenny.
thank you. So I'm going to start, obviously, my presentation on basic electrical, intermotive interlock system, and some bus body maintenance such. And so the basic electrical, I had a video for that, and I'm going to skip that because it's just a basic electrical and a little short of time on that. So I'm just going to go right into the intermotive system with some short videos. So just give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen. I'm assuming everybody can.
We can.
Looks good, Kenny.
Looks good. Okay. Thank you. All right. The first one here is on the intermotive system. Here's some basic information on the generation of the gateway system.
This session is to introduce you to the new gateway platform. What we're looking at here is the traditional, the older style, we call it classic gateway, and all the components that are used to hook it to the vehicle. What we have is a roughly 4 by 5.5 control box, and then we have a harness that connects the box to the lift. We have a data link harness which connects it to the data port. We have 2 LED panels. One was an APHIS fast idle panel, and then we have an ILIS, which is the 5 LED light LED panel that depicts all the status of the system, and of course 2 harnesses that connect them to the gateway box. Here we see the new platform. Obviously the difference is the size. We've made it compact. We've shrunk it down to a considerably smaller size, roughly 2 by 3. And what we have is still the connector for the lift. We have the same data harness. As you can see here, we've gone to 1 LED panel now instead of the 2. We've combined the fast idle on the left side and the ILIS LEDs on the right. And then we, of course, have a harness to connect it to the gateway box. One thing to note on the LED panel is that we've removed one of the LEDs. We now just have an LED that will glow green whenever high idle is requested. We've removed the red LED whenever battery power was dropped to the designated threshold. So this is your new gateway. Probably the most significant thing that you see on the gateway versus the old gateway is that all the connectors are different now. In Classic Gateway, I'll bring a picture in here. Classic Gateway, you'll notice that we had 3 6-pin connectors here that could be plugged in backwards, and that could be a catastrophic issue for the module. So we've learned our lessons. We got away from that. Now we are just simply with different connectors throughout the module. One of the last things that we'll cover in this session is that the new module has a jack on here that will allow it to be connected to a laptop computer. This is used for programming in the field. In the Classic Gateway, if there was an issue with the firmware, we would have to have the module returned to Intermotive for an update to the firmware, which means you had downtime, you had to remove it from the bus. Now we can just take a laptop, we can update the firmware right through this port and minimize all the shipping time. Next session we'll talk about very specific things on this new gateway. Thank you. This session is going to be looking at the connections that are on the gateway product. Typically you'll find this product up underneath the dash, usually on top of the knee bolster. It can be mounted anywhere that the OEM chooses, but what you're going to look for is this particular module. And on the module you'll see these basic connections. The first connection that we're going to look at is the data link connection. What you see here is a T-harness. The T-harness is engineered so that we can plug our red connector into the OEM connector that looks very similar to this. And what we do is we have the OEM then connect this back up where the OEM plug was so that they can still have a pass-through for testing the vehicle with a scan tool. If you follow the cable up, you will find out where the actual connection is made and where the gateway is. If you notice here, we have our 6-pin connector plugged into a 6-pin receptacle. The second connection that we have here is our lift harness. The lift harness is a 4-pin Molex connector. It's plugged into the port that you see right here. It has a locking mechanism. If we pinch and pull, we can disconnect the harness. And what this harness does is this will run back to the lift. It has 3 basic wires to it. It's got an orange wire for power to the lift. We call it vehicle secure. Whenever the vehicle interlock is correctly positioned, then we allow power to come to here to the lift relay. The yellow wire is a battery voltage going from VBAT into the module, and then we have a gray wire that is connected to the door switch. The OEM may have cut off our connector and put on some mating wire connectors, or you may find our Molex connector there. The final third connector on our basic connection is our LED panel harness. If you look at this connector, it's a very small, another here again has a locking pinch connector. So if you hold this, pinch it, and pull it, you can disconnect this from this connector. I'll bring it up a little closer so you can see the actual connector itself. And then of course the pinch is right at the edge here. So that's plugged into this connector, and then of course this runs up to, typically mounted on the dash, the LED panel, which is connected in a similar fashion on the back. You have once again a pinch connector. This harness is universal, it can go either way, but typically you'll find this plugged into the back of the LED panel on the dash.
today's session will be on the Gateway LED panel. The Gateway LED panel is now a single piece unit, and it's made up of two sections. We've got the fast idle section, and we've got the interlock section. Okay, we'll focus first on the fast idle section. This is what we call AFIS, Automatic Fast Idle System. There's only one active button on this entire panel, and that is the engage button. This button serves several purposes. Number one, if the vehicle is not in fast idle and you wish to engage it manually, the vehicle has to be in park, and then if you depress this button, it'll automatically, manually put it into fast idle. The second function of this button is if you're in fast idle and you wish to disengage fast idle, then you'll just push this button and the service brake and hold for about 3 or 4 seconds, and that'll take it out of fast idle until you actually go through a shift cycle. Shift cycle is when you take the vehicle out of park and put it back into park. The third function of this engage button is you can manually step up the idle by 100 RPMs on gas vehicles. Each time you press the button, you'll go up another 100 RPMs. And then the fourth function of the button is to put the system into diag mode. We'll get into the diag mode on the fast idle in a later session. Okay, now we're going to concentrate on the lift interlock side of it. Here again, we have LEDs on the top that indicate whenever something is happening, and we've got our backlit icons that tell you what those things are. What we have here is what we call vehicle secure. This is the lift door, park brake, PB. We have a P here for park, and then the last one is a lock for the shift lock. Now, whenever we engage a certain thing, open the door, put park brake on, put the vehicle in park, we get an indicator up in the top. Whenever we have lift door open or the park brake, we'll automatically fire the shift lock. So in this particular case, if I were to step on the park brake, engage park brake, I would automatically turn on shift lock. Now we have park brake, park, and we have shift lock. We still won't get the vehicle secure until we actually open the lift door. Now the same thing is true. If I open the lift door and I don't have park brake set, I will still have the shift lock fired, but I won't have the vehicle secure. In this particular case, here we go. We've taken the park brake off, but we've opened the lift door. Because I have one of these two active, I've actually fired shift lock. Now if I act from this position, if I step on the park brake, then I will activate all of the LEDs, and of course I will activate my vehicle secure signal. So I've got the lift door open, the park brake set, vehicle's in park, shift lock is fired, vehicle secure signal is being sent back to the lift. That's your makeup of the LED panel for Gateway.
All right, so love the music, right? Kind of dates it a little bit, but anyway, it has very good information on it as to how the interlock system works and why do we need an interlock system, right? Anytime we use the wheelchair lift, we need the vehicle to be secured and not be able to move, because we don't want to be moving that vehicle with the lift out or somebody on the lift, creating a big situation and somebody getting hurt. So as you can see, the gateway module is, in this particular case, E450 is located right underneath the knee bolster there. A little closer shot of it is right there. They just simply attach it to the foam that is in the knee bolster area. You just pull that panel down and it is right there. So this here is an electrical drawing from Elkhart Coach showing the gateway module. The gateway module is right there. It shows that 4-pin Molex connector that he was talking about. something that that wasn't mentioned is a little buzzer right here. So if you do not have a park brake set and you go open the wheelchair lift door, this little buzzer is going to come on and say, hey, we have a problem here, something's wrong. So we need to find out why. And your lift will not light up like it should also when that happens, because we don't have vehicles secure. So we have to go back, set the park brake. Once we set the park brake, that little buzzer will shut up and our lift should come alive then at that point. So, okay. So I'm going to go into just some different electrical systems in different buses, just some samples of some things here. And in this particular case, we see an electrical panel in a Supreme built bus, okay? What we have up here in the right-hand corner is an AC relay system with terminals and power leads going to it. So all of our AC system is controlled by this board. It could be an add-on or a tie-in system, depending, but either way, you're going to end up with this system in that electrical area. We can see some circuit breakers and some fuses here in this location, connection bar for ground. We have some power wires here. I'm going to take a little closer shot here of the fuse panel and relay board. You can see some lights on and different things. But what I did here is I'm going to remove this 15 amp fuse. If I go to the next screen, I'm going to see a red light on now. So what I did was I created an open circuit. So I simply made this circuit open like a fuse was blowing, right? So being this red light is on, it's telling me that there's a problem here and I need to look at it. So it's just a quick indicator to show me that my fuse was blowing. So pop it out, take a look at it, test it, replace it, and try your circuit again. If it was for dome lights or heaters, whatever that was protecting, it'll just check that circuit, okay? So in this particular Supreme, this is just what the switch panel looks like. If this is on a Freightliner chassis, you can see the intermotive interlock system that we were talking about already. Some of the basic switches here, the doors, lights, the heaters and such. The AC controls are right here. We got temperature and fan speeds. This particular panel is from an Arbach. We can see a body solenoid up on top here, and then behind these two covers, we have fuses and relays. In this particular application, it does not have a red light to show us that a fuse is blown. So the only way to test them is to test the individual pins on top of the fuse to see if a fuse is blown, or simply pull it out and inspect it. They also have this connection up here. This is for their, it's a COM1 connection. It is for their airlift system. So that's where you test your, you inspect and test your airlift system on the rear of the Arbach buses. Again, switch panel here in Arbach. This is a Chevy chassis, but again, different switches and located on the doghouse panel, and then your interlock system is right here. This is the newer system on an Elkhart coach, and again, we're looking at a lot of stuff in here, but really just the same, just in different locations. Oops. Back up one here. But connection bar for the AC system is all up in this right-hand corner. We got some 40 amp fuses for the AC, and again, fuses and relays and connection points. And we have our main terminal bar coming in here for positive and ground. So biggest indicator there is black is generally negative and red is positive. So don't mix those up if you're attaching camera systems or GPSs or things like that to that. And something else you don't want to do is obviously overload a circuit. So always start a new circuit, even if you have to add a fuse block to another fuse block similar to this to run your different accessories. So, and again, this is an Elkhart coach. Notice not all buses have a lift switch. I just want to point out. So you may or may not see a lift switch. But again, if your lift switch is not on and you go open that door, you're going to get that buzzer to come on that we were talking about earlier. So make sure everything is set correctly before you get activation of your lift. You can see the AC controls down here. This particular switch setup is on the doghouse on an E450. So this is an Elkhart coach also. This is the first generation, which has been out a long time. They just changed to that second generation that we just seen here a minute ago. Significant decrease in the size, but a couple things here on this board that I want to point out is these fuses are resettable. So there's a little tab that pops out if they trip out. So all you simply do is push that in to reset the fuse, and your circuit is active again. If you ever replace this board, this little circle up here is a buzzer when you get it. Elkhart makes an interlock system themselves.
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes?
Sorry, I'm also listening to this. They wanted me to stick around to the end of it. Oh,
Okay. So if you get a new board and that buzzer is on there and your old board doesn't have one, simply remove that buzzer by grabbing it and twisting it off. You do not need that buzzer if it isn't on there. So something very worthy or noteworthy on that unit. So
Kenny, just to let you know that we have 4 minutes, but we have no questions right now, so we'd like to keep you going.
okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thanks.
So a little a different angle of that same box. You can see the AC board back here in the side with the relays. Most of the relays are for compressor and blowers. You see there's an inline fuse here. Make sure that that's good if you're having issues with your AC system, and also the 40 amp fuses. Make sure that they're good. So before you start, if you start seeing a problem with your AC system. Something noteworthy too, this type of circuit breaker, this gray one, once in a while you'll see a little black tab sticking out of the side of it. They are resettable if they trip out. This style is typically automatic resetting, but if it has that little black tab sticking out of it, and they're not always the easiest to see, but you simply push that in to reset it. And the way to test that, of course, is put a voltmeter or a test light on the one terminal coming in for power, and then your output power should have power on it also. They can be keyed hot or ignition hot, so be careful when you're testing. This is the ignition body solenoid. So this supplies power from your battery to the body of the bus, all right? So in a situation where nothing is working in your bus, but everything seems to be, bus is running fine, but your lights aren't working, your heaters aren't working in your bus, this could be defective, or there's a no power coming to this. So we'll go down here to okay. So I'm just real quick here. This is a different switch panel setup for an Elkhart coach. You can see that they're not here in the doghouse, which opens up the doghouse for more cup holders and storage area. And the switch panel is put up here. The intermotive LED light system is on the below the instrument panel here by the steering column. So, and then of course the AC controls are up above. You can see where the rear view mirror is here, and the AC controls are up above on the header there. So, so in a typical, this is a typical battery compartment in a bus. You can see there's some breakers here on the side. One of them is self-resetting. One of them is a manual reset. So this is where the power comes from to supply power to that body solenoid in your bus. So check for loose connections if you don't have power there, or if you see this little yellow tab sticking out, simply push it back in. It may have tripped unexpectedly or prematurely. Push it back in and then test for power, and you should have power running up to your body solenoid now. To test it, you just simply push the blue button in, and then that little lever should pop out. And then of course just push it back in to make sure that its power is going through it again. So I think that's about it, Gene, that I've got. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kenny. I don't have any questions. Is there anyone live at Rochester that has questions? There's none in our chat.
I do have a body maintenance video that's on our website at northcentralinc.com under training and videos. It was going to be part of my presentation, but I'm run out of time. So there's also a basic electrical video that I have too. It's made by BBB Industries. It's available on YouTube. It's a very good layman's term type basic electrical system layout and some basic stuff for anybody to watch. So good information to get to. So
great. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for attending today, and special thanks to Cody and Kenny for their presentations and insights on wheelchair lifts and small bus maintenance work. I really appreciate learning this thing. This is not something I do every day, so it's very interesting to me. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Yep, thanks. It was good meeting you guys, and you too, Kenny. Sorry for if I infringed on any of your time.
No worries, no worries. It worked out very well. Thank you.
Yep, have a great day, guys. Nice meeting you.